welcome to the College of Creation. My name is Dan.
And my name is Michael.
And we are Dungeons & Dragons DMs who are now on episode 20 of making items, spells, creatures, and features for D&D. It is a momentous occasion, Michael. How are you feeling today?
I didn't think I would ever make a podcast, let alone make 20 episodes of a podcast. So this is great.
Yeah, so excited. I've been having just such a good time with this. It's time, I think, just about for us to go back and think about some of the things that we made so we can put them all together, make some changes, because we don't want these to be things that we just make and then never go back to and smooth out. Some of these are good enough ideas that they need a little bit of love, a little bit of tweaking, but that's the beauty and the joy of doing work like this is you come up with an idea and maybe you hit a rough draft, but the real joy comes in continuing to let that develop, especially as you'll find today. I definitely took into account a lot of the feedback that you've given and a lot of the stylings that we figured out together.
I think the thing I had the most fun with this week, looking back on our first 5 creations, was the expectation versus reality being so different. I thought that I was going to have a lot of fun looking back at the barbarians specifically, because that was one of my favorites, but there were just very few little changes that I made to that one, and it just went by so quickly that I had a lot more fun with the ones that originally I thought weren't going anywhere. Being unburdened by the constraints of a prompt now, taking these and moving them into a direction where they can be more feasible in a game and kind of moving out of what the prompt originally dictated gives us a little bit more room to make it within our own flavor. And that's what I did with particularly the sorcerer and the level scaling items from episode 5. So those were actually the most fun ones to go back and look at for me, which was not expected.
I think my initial thought going into it was that this is pretty good. This probably just needs a couple quick edits. But then over the course of our conversations, because I re-listened to episodes to kind of remind myself what was going on.
Me too.
Some of them were I could do more with this than I think I initially thought, which is very cool. Great. I love it. It was a really good experience for me to go back and take in some of the feedback to make those adjustments.
It's worth saying, I think, both of us have matured over the course of the last 5 months.
Yeah.
And that is reflected in how we build things now, which is a much more well-rounded, much more thoughtful way of building things. And we didn't necessarily have that scope when we started. So these first 5, I was kind of shocked at how unrefined they felt for me now, because I'm used to making things so under such a rigorous timeline. That these first 5, I was like, oh man, these feel really rushed.
You get used to the timeline.
Now I don't necessarily feel that as much anymore. So that was good to kind of slow down and and look at these again. It was really nice.
Yeah, definitely.
But yes, let's get right into this.
We got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Episode 1, we started this entire series out with a sorcerer, a magic-absorbing sorcerer. Both of us went in completely different directions. I would love to see your updates.
Yeah, definitely. So you will recall, of course, that I made the Arcane Reclaimant. The whole functional mechanic of this was just... This is a sorcerer that can capture residual magic from the casting of spells. So I made a fair few changes to this one. I didn't change the spell list at all. I feel like I was still pretty pleased with the spell list that I started with. In our conversation, we talked about how I kind of wish that I could find more ways to gain these fragments of power and more ways to utilize them. So that's really what I tried to focus on. It was just expanding that idea into more ways to create the versatility and flexibility of sorcerers, which is a lot of what we talked about that episode. So instead of having the arcane capture ability, the one where you can grab incoming magic that's being cast at you, waiting until 6th level for that, I wanted to trigger that earlier. So again, you have more ways to grab these fragments of power and utilize them. So I put Reclaim Potential and Arcane Capture all at the same level. So when you cast a sorcerer spell of 1st level or higher, you can use the residual magic to summon a translucent fragment of magical power that hovers around you for 1 minute, same as the normal. But then I moved Arcane Capture. When you are targeted by a spell, attack, or forced to make a saving throw against a spell effect, you can attempt to harness some of the incoming magic as a fragment of power. As a reaction, you can make a charisma check with a DC of 10 plus the triggering spell's level, 1 for a cantrip. And if you succeed, you summon a fragment of magical power around you for up to 1 minute. So now you have the ability to grab magic either from your own casting of 1st level or higher sorcerer spells or from magic coming in towards you. And then I added a second way to utilize the fragments of power. So the one that I had there was just like reduce the cost of sorcery point usage by 1 by dismissing a fragment. And that's good, but like triggering it at 1st level is kind of complicated because you don't get sorcery points to do much until 3rd level. So I also added potent casting, which is something we talked about. So when you force a creature to make a saving throw against one of your sorcerer spells, you can dismiss a fragment to subtract 1d4 from the target's saving throw. Limited Bane, you're the one who triggers it. You just utilize that fragment to push your casting a little bit over the top. If you can stack those things and make them work and just really be that guy who always makes people fail on their saving throws, great. That's very cool.
I like that a lot at 1st level. That's a really good change.
And so I was trying to figure out what to do then at 6th level, and the other thing we talked about a lot in that episode was how it would be a cool thing and something that feels very sorcerer-like to allow for upcasting, to allow for pushing spells beyond the normal bounds of what you should be able to do. So, at 6th level, you can attempt to use your fragments of power to cast spells beyond your natural ability. You can dismiss any of your summoned fragments of power when you cast a sorcerer spell of 1st level or higher to attempt to cast the spell at 1 level higher per fragment spent without expending a higher level spell slot, even if the level would be higher than the level of spells you can normally cast. When you do, you cannot cast spells other than cantrips until the end of your next turn.
That's a great new feature. Yeah.
You don't get fresh 6th level spells, right? You don't get to cast a spell that you don't know. You just get to push it 1 level higher than you normally would, and you still expend the spell slot that you would. You just don't have to go any higher than that. And the limiting factor of only casting cantrips still means that you still have some versatility if you're going to try and get more arcane fragments back. You can't do that on your own until 1 turn later.
Right.
It keeps you from being able to do this every single turn you're doing anything at all. Spell reorientation and fount of potential basically stayed the same. So those are the ability to redirect spells that are cast towards you by dismissing your fragments to send it in a different direction. And fount of potential just means that your fragments end up staying with you longer. They don't dissipate until a short or long rest.
Love it. It feels a lot more balanced. It feels a lot more intentional with the progression. And again, I think that that's attributed to this being the first one that we made in this format. And it just kind of, it's strange to just jump into making something blind by yourself with really nothing to bounce off of except for 1 line of prompt in 6 days. So this feels like the good, fleshed out, ready for testing version, what the Reclaimant should have been.
And one of the really interesting things that I thought about while I was updating this was that it does a thing that I really like to do when homebrewing, but I don't think I had the language to know that I like doing that, or the way to express it so that I could focus on that thing. But our conversations, and that's a thing that you've noticed as an external viewer about my homebrew style, is that I like to have, here's sort of the like core thing, which in this case is these fragments of power. and then I like to give you options for like how you use that thing. But like you're always gonna kind of come back to the pillar, right? So I love to have a pillar with lots of offshoots. And I don't know if I understood that. I think I do that sort of unconsciously. So now having the language and having that external perspective, be able to say, that's a thing that you do and you're good at, means that going back to edit this, I was like,
Let's
okay, now I can
apply
consciously
this.
focus on that. Now I can consciously see, here's the pillar. So how else can I support that pillar? Great, because I think that's really the focus that I went into this with. So incredible way to think about not just each other's homebrew, but my own homebrew.
Yeah.
What about you? What did you make changes on?
My first episode creation was the photosynthetic soul sorcerer. Absorbs energy, absorbs magic via the sun. I tackled this not from a pillar and offshoot type of perspective. I have 6 very different features for my sorcerer that all kind of build around the central idea of healing and radiant energy. I leaned deeper into the healing factor. Starting right off the bat, I changed one of my spells out. At first level, I did have Fairy Fire, and I changed that to Healing Word. I felt like that felt a little bit better. I also super nerfed my 2 first level features to the benefit of the subclass, I think. I think that they were both very confusing in their wording and just too stuffed to make it make sense for being under the umbrellas that they were under. At first, I had the mitochondrian feature, which lets this sorcerer change any charisma-based feature to a constitution-based feature. I changed the verbiage there to make it a little bit more clear that anything that you have that is charisma-based, skills, spell casting, anything but saving throws, because those are decidedly separate, they are based on your constitution instead of charisma. And that is the entire feature. Before, I had a convoluted way to change your hit dice if you're standing in sunlight, and I hated that.
It's cool, but it's so complicated.
Yeah. It was a way to shoehorn in that absorption element.
Yeah.
Also, at first level, I have the solar conduit feature, which also was a little bit too complex. It had an ignoring of radiant resistance in there. It had a stipulation for the transmuted spell, which upon review doesn't make sense as a first level feature because you don't have access to meta magic at first level. So I completely rewrote that. So your cantrips can be radiant if you choose, and you can spend a sorcery point to change spell damage to radiant. There was like a granting of meta magic, but it was bad. It was not worded well in the slightest, and I think it's much, much better now.
I like it.
At level 6, we have the osmosis feature, which is largely the same. I just have a small change here. You brought up the fact that it stated that plants within the osmosis radius were immune to spells and effects that target plants specifically, which could mean some healing spells, like spells like Tree Stride or Transport via plants. So I changed that to targeting plants adversely. Spells like Blight or Wither and Bloom, just to make it more clear. At 14th level, I have almost a completely new feature. This is the biggest change on the sheet. Before, it had a lot of cosmetic details in there, a lot of assumed things that I don't typically enjoy forcing on players. I think it was kind of in the line of like absorbing the energy so it changes your body. I didn't really like how I worded that. So I changed it from doubled proficiency in nature and medicine to whenever you cast a spell that deals radiant damage, you gain temp hit points equal to the spell's level. So it feels more like chlorophyll.
Right.
It is a better, more streamlined way to get a little bit back from your spell casting.
Yeah.
I kept the creature type changing to plant and the speak with plants at will. But that's the only thing I kept from before. And at 18th level, this is the exact same. Just the photosynthetic rend
I still love the choice between using those D8s either in a harmful or a helpful way as a sort
Yeah,
of balance mechanic. That's great.
that's the only one that I didn't change at all. I
Yeah, I like
liked it a
that one.
lot. I also removed all of the meta magic that I made. One of them ended up being one of our druid spells from a few
Yeah,
weeks
yeah, yeah.
ago, and the other ones just weren't fully realized.
There was that one that was really cool. The one where you could extend like the range.
There was one. It was called Germinating Spell
Yeah.
that allowed for a second area of effect
Yeah.
to pop up next to the main AOE whenever you cast a spell with an area of effect. I really like it.
We gotta figure that out because that's something
Yeah.
else that's like there's something there that's very cool and feels especially sorcery pointish and meta magic-y that like I just can't quite figure out what it is.
Yeah, it's got to be. I put it in my document.
Yeah,
My
it's somewhere.
good ideas to use later document because it didn't quite fit here. I'm waiting
Yeah.
for the day that a prompt comes through that it just clicks and
Yeah.
somebody else out in the world gives me the piece that I can't figure out myself. Until then, it will remain in purgatory, unfortunately.
Yeah, just don't lose that idea. I think it's a very cool idea. Something needs to happen with it.
There is something there. There is something there. But yeah, I think largely this is a much more clear, a much more concise version of this sorcerer subclass, and I like it so much more.
Yeah, and I feel like having like I think I spoke at length during the actual recording of the episode about how much I liked the pivot that you took when it came to the prompt of magic absorbing and took it to sort of just energy absorbing and then honed in on a specific kind of energy. And I thought that was really, really cool. I do love the changes though here that even pull away from the idea of absorbing and just focus on that solar energy focus.
It's more
There is
channeling now than absorbing.
now, yeah, exactly. It's channeling. There's still some absorption, but it feels more versatile. It feels more, yeah, like you said, focused to me here. A little looser in terms of, I think, the player's ability to make it their own.
Yes. Yep.
Great changes. I want to hear about your barbarian changes though, because you said that was one that went really quick for you.
It did. It did. There were very few changes here. A lot of them were mechanical changes more than anything.
The second episode was the HP absorbing barbarian, which we both took into a like death or undeath focused place, like a necrotic energy focused place very quickly.
Yeah, there were not a lot of changes here. I kept the core idea of each of these features basically the same, and I just scaled them all back. Your biggest critique was how strong it could be if things lined up the right way. And the more I looked at it, the more I kind of thought about how a barbarian would act in combat, out of combat. It just seemed that the correct way to really break this subclass felt more and more common. And I do think that especially level 11, level 12 plus, the barbarian kind of plateaus off as a core class. So you need a little bit of a boost at those later levels. Not nearly as much of a boost as I gave it with this subclass. It really kind of flew off the rails with the scaling, the dice scaling. So that was the main thing that I walked back with this. Okay. This is one that I truly think that I couldn't go any further with unless I personally play tested it myself. Like I would love to sit at a table that was made for play testing. Like the only idea was that we're going to test new things. Yeah. And I would play this subclass just to see how it goes. Because I truly do not know. I had a cap of a D12 for the implantation dice before at episode 2. I have that capped at a D10 now at a higher level. Before it was at 6, 10, and 14, which it lined up with the actual class features, the subclass features for a D8, a D10, and a D12. And that was just at 14th level, having the possibility of pouring all of your dice all D12s into one hit, the possibility of just one hitting, just solo one-shotting,
Yeah, I mean that's like
was quite possible.
that's like a wormling. Like you could take down a
Yeah,
wormling in a
yeah.
single shot with if you had like the right equipment and rage going and everything like that. I think you could make it happen.
The stipulation there is you'd have no subclass utilization after that.
Right.
Like if you're pouring everything into
You're
one
done.
hit,
Yeah.
that's really like the risk you take.
Right.
But that one hit was way too powerful.
Yeah.
Way too powerful. So I walked that back. Yeah.
It's so hard to build thinking both of the Nova use case and also the more likely commonplace use case and trying to figure out a way to balance those things. It can be very tricky. Very, very tricky. I do like the level scaling also going at off levels to the other subclass abilities, just because sometimes when you get like a new subclass ability, you want that to kind of be the focus of the next couple levels, right? Rather than
Yeah.
you being like, okay, I have this, and now I have nothing to look forward to until here. Having it at off levels, I think, helps spread out the benefit of the subclass too, which is great.
Other than that, level 10 and level 14 are relatively the same. I think I changed the wording. Maybe I changed the verbiage a little bit. But
yeah, I can see a couple of the changes to the wording, but they do seem pretty great. I like the free action rage as the spore colony sort of takes over your mind. I think we talked a little bit about like wouldn't it be fun to put in like some external trigger that like you don't have control over, but I do think that's too convoluted.
I thought about that and
it's too much. It's way too complicated. If at a table, you were a player playing this and you wanted to do that flavor-wise, and I was your DM, I would absolutely be like, yes, let's talk about it. What are the things that we're going to say are like, you have to make a wisdom save or this happens, so we can both have those. But I don't think you need to like log it into the actual words here.
I guess this was part of my thinking originally during the second episode too, but especially now going in with fresh eyes, combat, as much as players like to conflate the barbarian purpose with combat play, a lot of times you're not in combat.
Right.
There are a lot of times when your players are going to be in towns, in peaceful situations. And I really, that really made me think, I don't need it. I don't need an external trigger here. I don't need a character just going off and raging on some citizens in a town for no reason and make it so that they mechanically are forced to do that.
Yeah.
So I think it is a good idea, and it's like germinating spell. I have to just ruminate on how to make that a reality later for a different creation without compromising the agency of the player.
Yeah. I like that.
What about you? You have the Path of the Cursed?
Yes. The Path of the Cursed was the one that I went with, and it did some similar things, but it specifically dealt with taking down your enemy's ability scores and bringing yours up, like applying these like ability score curses. What I talked about a lot, though, was how I wanted the idea, the sort of narrative idea of the subclass still relies on like, you are a character that has been cursed, but I didn't really codify what the nature of the curse was or what effects it had. Because another thing I've figured out that I also like to do is a lot of risk reward, a lot of playing with that in a very, interesting mechanical way. And I could just leave it up to the DM and the player to figure out what that curse exactly is. And there's still, lots of room to do that in this new thing. But that's the biggest thing that I added here. I left a lot of it the same, but the first part of it now is that the subclass description starts by bringing up the cursed nature. So your power stems from a curse that needles and torments you when you are not raging. So the idea is that this curse wants you to rage. It is only sated by your anger. So choose the manifestation of your curse from the list below, or work with your DM to determine the appropriate curse. And I have 5 examples here, basically. And they're overall, some of them are perhaps more of a detriment than others, but for the most part, they're pretty minor. Starting with the Curse of the Anchor. Your curse binds you to another creature. You can work with your DM to determine the nature of this relationship. So any status conditions are shared between creatures regardless of location. Ooh. And if one creature dies, the other creature also instantly dies. Now that one's super narrative, right? That one's like, okay, this, we are working very closely together to determine what this is, and
a lot of like trust between the player and DM with that one.
The Curse of Burdening. Your curse consumes a large part of your psyche. You have 1 fewer attunement slot, so this curse takes up an attunement slot. The Curse of Fury is actually what we were just talking about, which is your curse causes your anger to surge unexpectedly. When you roll a natural 1 on an ability check, attack roll, or saving throw while you are not raging, you are compelled to enter a rage as a free action. While raging in this way, you can only take the attack action on your turn.
Yeah, that's cool.
I should probably put something at the end to be like, you can, make a wisdom saving throw at the end of each of your turns to end this effect.
Yeah.
Just sends you flying into a rage. You're always kind of like at the doorstep of rage. The Curse of Monstrosity. Your curse warps your appearance in horrific ways, so you have disadvantage on all charisma checks except charisma intimidation. And then the Curse of the Reaper. Your curse has loosened your grasp on the mortal coil, so you stabilize at 4 successful death saving throws instead of 3.
Dang.
Just takes a little bit more for you to come back up when you go down.
Yeah. This is such a good change. It's an anti-feature, right? It is a thing that's built into the subclass that is actively a detriment to you, and it says a lot about how you like to play. Like you and I both, we've talked about this at length, where we enjoy unoptimized characters. Mm-hmm. Playing something that's super strong or super streamlined can be fun if it's like a level 20 one shot where you're really just trying to be the best that you can be. But in a long form narrative campaign, this is such an interesting subclass. It's such an interesting piece of this. The Curse of the Anchor is my favorite one. I think that's so cool, especially if the other anchor creature is like a significant enemy, because that gives you as the barbarian a nuclear failsafe, right? If things are not going well, self-sacrifice, baby.
Yeah, I think that was pretty much all of the changes that I made. I think I kept the applying a curse when you hit a creature while you're raging to reduce one ability score and increase your same ability score by the same amount. I kept the Curse Aura, where if creatures within you rolls a 1, you can use your reaction to gain temporary hit points equal to half your barbarian level. I think I kept the Curse Breaker feature as it was.
It looks pretty similar.
Did I change anything about it? Nope, it's all the same. But when you do that, you also have to reduce your own ability score by 1 until you complete a long rest. And then I think, the last feature is also just about the same.
I think it looks identical to me. I'm looking at, I have them side by side right now. I think it is pretty much exactly the same.
The strength, I think, and the versatility of the subclass also play well with the cursed nature of it, because once you do put in, like, here's the penalty for taking this subclass, it allows it to be a little bit more on the beefy side, a little bit more, you don't, you're giving a trade-off for the level of power and the level of intensity that you are going to bring to the subclass for sure. So that's what I ended up with. I'm pretty pleased with just adding that little element. I think just adds a lot of flavor to push it into what I think is probably like play testable, ready to roll at a table.
Yeah, I think both of our barbarians are right at that same point. Yeah. Where I'd like to see them in play.
Yeah, same.
Great stuff, man.
On we go to the monk features. I'm going to be honest, Michael, I didn't change my monk feature very much. I think I changed a little bit of the formatting. I believe I changed a little bit of the wording in a couple of them. I think specifically like Sleeper Hold, I changed the wording of a little bit. I added, I think, a couple of these, and I changed the name of one or two of them. But all of these monastic features are pretty much the same. The monastic techniques. I did add two types of strikes because I really like the functionality of having the strikes similar to Stunning Strike. They did a similar thing, but they would be a little more versatile, a little more customizable to the kind of monk you want to play. So there's Staggering Strike, which is the same cost as Stunning Strike. Target must succeed a Constitution saving throw or have its movement speed reduced by 10 feet and be unable to benefit from any bonus to its movement speed until the end of your next turn. So if you're trying to run away, etc., you can, just try and reduce their movement a little bit so that the rest of your group can move a little bit quicker away. And then Threatening Strike, when you hit a creature with a melee weapon attack, you can spend 1 key point to attempt to frighten the creature's allies. So any creatures of your choice within 15 feet of you that can see you must make a Wisdom saving throw. And on a failed save, that creature becomes frightened of you for 1 minute. A frightened creature can attempt the saving throw again to end the effect on the end of each of its turns. And if you reduce a creature to 0 hit points with a melee weapon attack, you can use this feature without spending key points. Which is the really
so good
extra fun part of this. Oh, the other part of Staggering Strike too is that any movement ability besides its walking speed, when you hit it and reduce the creature's movement speed by 10 feet, so anything like walking or anything besides walking, such as flying speed or burrowing speed, becomes 0 for the duration. So it can only walk.
Nice.
Unable to fly, unable to burrow, unable to swim. For example, if you happen to hit something in the water, so just can't move. It has to it's more or less stun, but not actually stun. There you go. I think for the most part, though,
this is good.
I kept these pretty much identical.
I must admit to you, I didn't change mine at all.
You didn't change yours at all. Great. I don't think you needed to.
I didn't change
They were
mine
really
at all.
good.
Mine came as a set. They were based on something from the real world that only had 12 installations. There were 12 powers there. And really, I think the only thing that could get me to change them is this upcoming September, November, when the new players' rules for 2024 come out. Because I know that some of these things no longer take key points, and that was the basis for some of these. So I think maybe I will do a little add-on or something once the new rule books come out.
Sure, just to see what exactly
change them then.
It looks like, yeah.
As it is now for the 2014 version, these are all identical to episode 3.
Honestly, I do think of these first 5, maybe of these first 10 episodes that we're going to be going through to fill out the compendium, I do think both of us came in really strong with the monk episode, and both of us came in with something that was almost ready to go from the jump. So well done to both of us there. I don't think either of them needed much adjustment. How about your fighter's block then? Did you make any major changes to the fighter's block?
So there's one minor change and one substitution. I took one of them out completely because I didn't like it. I mean, it was fine. It was fine. There are plenty of things as we go through these weeks. If you've listened to all 20 of these episodes now, there are plenty of times where Dan and myself, we both are like, it's okay. I could take it or leave it. This was I had 5 days to do this, and I wanted to put something on the page. This is what it ended up being. That for me was the Flighter's block. That was the Heavy Cinder block, the Flighter's block.
Right. Yeah.
It was a Heavy Cinder block that you had to be grappling another creature to apply, and it just reduced their movement speed by 10 feet. And they can't fly, so it reduced their flying speed to 0. I replaced it with a new item, which I have called the Whiter's block, WIGHT, as in the undead creature, a white.
Yeah.
So this is the Whiter's block. This small puck of compact powder can be thrown up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see. Upon impact with the ground, it bursts, and a shimmering silver powder is ejected outward in a 15-foot radius dome. Any creature within the dome is covered in powder and becomes resistant to all attacks from undead for 10 minutes. That's all it is.
I like that.
Throw your powder on the ground, and you and your friends within 15 feet of you can charge into undead territory a little bit safer for 10 minutes.
Rock this before going into Castle Ravenloft. You are in good shape,
Exactly.
man. That's great.
You're feeling good. No paladin in your party. You're all good. No cleric in your party. You're in better shape than you were before.
Amazing.
I also did change slightly the fighter's beta blocker. I did change all the names. I
see that.
I took your idea. The bronze blocker, bronze plus, silver plus, and gold, according to the American healthcare system. Thank you, Obamacare.
This was so early that I don't think I had yet learned how quick you are to commit to the bit. So, yeah.
Immediately.
Not prepared.
Immediately. I also did change the scaling for the temp hit points.
Oh, okay.
I scaled them back a little bit. It's for 1d6 for the bronze, 1d6 plus 2 for bronze plus, 2d6 for silver, 2d6 plus 2 for silver plus, and 3d6 plus 2 for the gold level. So if you have the best insurance possible and they shell out some beta blockers for you and you're relatively rich, you can afford those higher level things, you get some temp HP to the tune of 3d6 plus 2 when you take some damage.
You just have to find a cleric who's in network.
That's the tough part, right? That's where they get you. They have all these great features, and then nobody is accessible.
Yeah, it's terrible. Well, that's great. I really like the Whiter's block, and yeah, very funny. Yeah. For the most part, same on my end. I changed a couple of wording things, specifically in the Fighter's block, which is a Warhammer, which allows you to, when a condition, spell, or other feature would prevent you from taking actions on your turn, you can still make melee weapon attacks with this weapon. I just added the caveat that if that feature or spell or condition prevents you from taking actions but doesn't make you incapacitated, you can still make melee weapon attacks with this weapon. So anything like unconscious, paralyzed, that technically also makes you unconscious would not allow this to be used, but anything else, things that would reduce your action economy, don't remove your ability to make attacks with this weapon. That's the biggest change there. And
That's
then
great.
I also changed
That's a
one
good
thing
change.
about the fighter's block shield. The one that granted you, I think previously, immunity to all non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage while wielding this shield. That I realized was maybe a little bit too crazy, especially in
For a rare shield, yeah.
especially in a setting or a campaign where like you're dealing a lot with like humanoid settlements and things like that, and not dealing with a lot of spellcasters or other magical creatures. You are quickly going to be
never going to get hit. Yeah.
the one who never takes damage.
Invincible.
So, I changed it to resistance to non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. And then when you are hit by an attack made with a non-magical melee weapon, you can use your reaction to gain immunity to the triggering damage type until the end of your next turn.
That's
you
good.
You can block martial attacks of a specific type. So if it's piercing, if it's bludgeoning, if it's slashing. You can just set yourself up to not take any of that for one turn if you want to burn your reaction on that. So that's the biggest change. Everything else the same. The dice are identical. They do not change.
I like that a lot. I like it a lot. Talk to me about your skill brands.
Yes, I did make some pretty major changes to the skill brands. The episode 5 was level scaling items, so specifically items that scale with character's level. And in this case, I did make a pretty major change because I listened through the episode again and I was like, this is complicated and there are too many of them. And also, I really liked your idea of putting the onus on the players to decide when this happens. Or like, because mine were the skill brands that every time you gained an ability score improvement, it would activate, and the activation meant it would reduce your max HP by a certain amount, but then you would get the bonus. But you mentioned that it would be cool if players could choose when they want this to activate. Now, I liked that. I also, listening to the episode again, thought, well, it's not really level scale exactly.
Yeah.
It was, but it wasn't. I liked tying it to ability score improvement, but I do think that meant that, like, this is a better choice for some classes than it is for others. And also the way that it was scaled based on rarity and the max HP decrease also didn't work for certain classes, so I changed it. Huge overall change. There are only 5 brands now, because I realized that I could just lump them together in a much more simplified form. And the biggest change is that when the brand is applied, which is an attunement process that takes 1 hour, when the brand is applied, the benefit activates automatically. There's no penalty the first time. You just get the thing right away, ready to go. But each time a character gains a level, it can choose to take the listed result instead of rolling its new hit die in order to activate the brand again. So when you go to roll your new hit die to set your max HP for level 9 or 10 or whatever it is, you can choose to instead say, I'm going to take a 2, and there you go, and you get your feature. But you must choose to do so before you roll the die. It's not a necessary caveat, but if you're at a table like mine that says if you roll below half the die size, you take half, this would override that. So you do have to take 1 if you have a rare brand and you want to take the benefit of that. So the brands are now still uncommon, rare, and very rare. And the hit die results that you have to take in order to activate them are 2, 1, and 0, respectively. So for a very rare brand, if you want to activate that, when you gain a new level, you are only getting your Constitution added onto your max HP, which is beefy, but is worth it for the one very rare brand that I have here, if you ask me. So I've moved it also to just simplify it to the brand of ability, which says when this brand is activated, 1 ability score chosen when you first receive this brand increases by 1 to a maximum of 20. The brand of skill is very similar. When this brand is activated, 1 skill bonus chosen when you first receive this brand increases by 1 to a maximum of plus 17. Plus 17 being the highest double proficiency plus maximum skill level base.
Sure.
Math. So it's plus 5 plus 6 times 2 if you have expertise. So it can never go past what you can normally set it at for that. The brand of the novice is a rare brand, so when activated, this brand raises your lowest ability score by 1 to a maximum of 20. So that will keep floating around as you raise 1 to a 10. The brand of quickness is uncommon. When you activate it, you increase your walking speed by 5 feet. And then the brand of the legend is the very rare brand. When this brand is activated, it raises your highest ability score by 1 to a maximum of 20. If your highest ability score is already a 20, this brand raises your next highest ability score by 1 instead.
That's great.
Eventually, this brand will push you to 20s across the board, basically, or get you as close as it can if you're setting your stuff up right. But it also means that your HP is going to be lower than it should be by a fair margin.
By a significant amount, yeah.
Up to you if you feel like that's worth it to raise certain things to be on their thing. But that's it. There's a lot of risk reward going on here, but also because you've got a 2, 1, or a 0 here as set numbers instead of reducing your max HP by a certain amount, it starts to make a little bit more sense across the board for multiple different classes. Plus the ones that you're going to probably take if you are not as constitute would be things like the brand of skill, or maybe the brand of ability, or the novice, which taking a 2 isn't going to be the worst possible option for a wizard. It's not great, and you want to be doing better than that, but it's 33%. Whereas in the case of a fighter, it's a lot more than that. It's it's a lot more of a detriment, but the payoff could be a lot better for some of the higher level ones here. So I don't know. I still don't know if I'm like totally sold on it, but I do think this is a better and cleaner version. So we'll stick with that for now.
I agree. I think it looks great.
Tell me about the talismans, though, because we weren't done with them, and now I'm excited to see what they look like in their final form.
Episode 5, I did not have these finished. The thing that I was trying to go for was far too ambitious. I did not have the wherewithal to get to the finish line in 5 days. It was too complex. There were too many things that I needed to craft ideas for. To remind everyone who is listening, I created things called Plutchik's Talismans of Inner Metal. And these are manifestations of a character's inner emotions that they want to project outward to help them within the game. It was too much to do in less than a week, and my solution to that was to strip everything back and streamline all of them. So I have a structure that applies to all 8 of these items that I put into the progressive attunement section here that kind of takes that out of each of them. So when you first attune to one of these talismans, you gain its foundational bonus. So this would be the unlocked feature from the first one. I also took out all of that terminology.
Yeah.
So you have a foundational bonus that just applies automatically once you're attuned. I also changed the actual progression from 5 levels to 4 between each of these. So if you are attuned to this item and you gain 4 player levels while you're attuned, you gain a +1 bonus to weapon or spell attacks, your choice. So that is at 4 levels. At 8 levels gained, you increase your foundational bonus in some way. So it heightens, and you gain the additional feature, which would have been the dynamic or the galvanized feature before. This is something that I'm calling enlightenment. So at this point, you have gone through 8 progressive levels. While attuned to this, you've gained enlightenment with this talisman. And then if you're at 12 levels, your bonus goes up to +2 for weapon or spell attacks, whatever you chose. So it's much cleaner, it's much simpler, easier to understand, and it's all complete. All of them have content all the way through. So the newer ones, the ones that were totally vacant before, sadness and disgust. So we have the Sapphire Rosary of Sadness. Upon attunement to this talisman, your proficiency bonus is doubled for all athletics and acrobatics checks, and you have advantage on all saving throws that would result in you becoming charmed or frightened. Base ability right there. Upon enlightenment, you automatically succeed on all athletics checks. You just, across the board, can do it.
Ooh.
And all saving throws that would result in you becoming frightened. I thought about saying immune to the frightened condition, but I think this is a more interesting way to go about that, because there are some times where you just are frightened, and it doesn't prompt a saving throw, so you're not immune to those. But there are other times when the saving throw encompasses more than just frightened, and you would succeed automatically on that saving throw. So there are times when you can gain other ability or other immunities extending past the frightened condition. It doesn't happen very often, which is why I thought it was okay to just give that. But now and then you'll catch a little extra bonus here and there. Additionally, when you cast a spell that utilizes an area of effect, its area increases by 50%, rounded down to the nearest 5 feet. So that is sadness.
Wow.
I mean, these are legendary items, so they're powerful. And you have to travel with this for 8 levels.
Yeah,
so
I mean, that's 8
assuming you
levels.
Don't pick it up at level 1,
we're
talking probably, level...
You're more than likely going to be like
10,
13 or so when you actually unlock the enlightenment stage of any of these. And again, like you said, they are legendary, so it's not like you'll just find these walking around in a shop.
Right.
These are quest rewards. These are dungeon finds. Like, this is a whole thing.
The other one is the Brooch of Disgust. This brooch draws on your greatest aversions to increase your capacity for unnerving and sickening others. Upon attunement to this talisman, you learn the Hex spell. You can cast it without material components a number of times equal to your charisma modifier. Charisma is your spellcasting ability for this spell, and all expended uses are regained after a long rest.
Great.
So you just get hex. You can hex people. Upon enlightenment, you can cast the hex spell at will. Additionally, any creature hexed by you is also frightened of you.
Ooh, nice.
No saving throw, no chance to remove the
Love it.
no additional reroll for the saves. You hex them, and they're just running away from you. And the other one that was not totally complete before was Fear.
Right.
Fear was the one that, those three you mentioned were the ones that you were most interested in seeing, because they were the most difficult, and they were the ones that were not finished. But this is the Emerald Belt of Fear. Upon attunement to this talisman, you can take the hide action as a bonus action, and it can be attempted even if you're only lightly obscured. Okay. That was part of it before.
Yeah.
So that stayed the same. This is where it veers off. Upon enlightenment, while hidden, you can make a ranged attack or cast a ranged spell without alerting other creatures to your position. Additionally, your walking speed increases by 15 feet. So you can run away
Huge.
a little bit faster.
Yeah, I love it. I think, did any of the rest of them like change really strongly materially beyond just changing around the wording of how you talk about the different stages?
Joy is basically the same. Anger and anticipation are basically the same. Some significant changes to trust. Upon attunement for the trust talisman, you can use an action to mark a willing creature as a trusted ally. That was a feature before, but it was much more complex, needlessly complex. While you and your trusted ally are within 15 feet of each other, you both gain +1 to your armor classes. You can only have one creature marked at a time, and they remain your trusted ally until you remove the mark as a free action. Upon enlightenment, when you and your ally are within 60 feet of each other, you can communicate telepathically. That's a new one.
Cool.
This is also new. Whenever you are within 5 feet of another creature, you can tell if it's lying or telling the truth.
Awesome. Yeah, I like these a lot. I also like how like some of them so clearly like align well with certain classes. Like the Belt of Fear is so good for a rogue or a ranger. Like it's almost too perfect. In a similar way, it feels like, you know, sadness works really well for kind of any sort of glass cannon.
Yeah, I was thinking sorcerers or wizards.
Yeah, it's super hard to charm, frighten. You're super hard to pin down and grapple, and you're able to expand your range spells. Very, very cool. I mean, you've basically set up a whole like collect 'em all Dragon Ball Z kind of campaign here for me, so I appreciate that. But the cleaning up of the wording to just standardize the progression. Here's what happens. You get the one thing, this next thing happens, and then it gets enlightened, and then you do get another bonus, but like really, you know, if you find this at level 10 and you're going to miss out on getting the level, you know, the 12th level gain bonus to it, that's fine. You can still get the level 8 one. You can still get the enlightened one, and it still gets to do the cool things that it wants to do. So that 12 one like feels like a good reward, but it doesn't feel like it's necessary to get the experience of what these are. It's very smart.
I really thought about putting the additional features at like the capstone, quote unquote. And I thought about the same thing, because these are not items that your DM is going to drop into the campaign at levels 1 to 4.
Right.
So you're really, if they do, very cool. You get, you know, an additional +1 to whatever you want after 12 levels. But really, it's about the initial attunement and sinking those 8 levels in.
Yeah, it's so smart to put it at a more attainable level.
Yeah, I like these so much better than the first ones. Just easier to read, easier to understand. I think this is a much better way to delineate what these are.
Yeah.
And in doing so, they are a more distilled version of what the actual emotions would do for somebody.
Yeah. I think that's very cool. I talked about it plenty in the original episode, how much I just like the concept and the way that you're able to pull some of those, out of game real world ideas and figure out ways to mechanically make something very approachable and interesting out of them. So yeah, I think this is just a really a great smoothing out of the core idea there, which I think was really strong. It was just sort of like the muddiness of, I think, you figuring out how to make it mechanically work, and just simplifying here has done it wonders, I think.
Thanks, man.
For sure, for sure.
Well, those were our first 5 episodes.
Wow.
That is a rehash of our first 5 episodes. We would love to hear what you all thought about the improvements. What other directions would you have gone from our original creations till now? We'd love to hear your thoughts. This was very fun to revisit these, and we will continue to do so up to level 10 in a couple weeks.
These are all so much better than they were the first time. Well, barring, I think, the monks were like already near perfect, but like everything else was I feel like just really honed in on something much more clear, much more well-focused, well-defined, and mechanically sound for sure. Well, I'll tell you what, folks, we're going to be coming at you with a rehash on our next 5 episodes as well, so that we can put out our College of Creation Compendium. We'll put them all together after we make all our edits. But next time, I think we're gonna drop something else, something a little bit different. Me and Michael working together, the two of us collaborating actively, based on a new subclass suggested by a friend of the show. That'll be a good time. Then we'll be back to rehash some more of our old creations. And then we've got a little surprise in store after that. So look forward to it. Michael, I will look forward to hearing some of your updates on your next 10 creations. Next 5.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm very excited for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah.
A lot of things that we've not done before. As our first attempt this upcoming week to craft something together live.
Yeah.
It's the first time we'll have gone into a recording with really nothing prepared other than notes on what we think might be viable for this subclass. We're going to be making a fighter subclass next week, live on mic. So that'll be cool, or it'll be disastrous. But either way, hopefully entertaining.
I think it's going to be, it's. I think both of us have just taken a lot of these conversations to heart and been able to expand our own creative process so much.
And if it works out next week, then we'll do it again.
Yeah. Hey.
Or we won't.
Absolutely. Well, until then, Michael, I think we've talked for plenty of time.
Agreed.
But do you have anything to say to the people before we say goodbye?
I always have something to say to the people before we say goodbye. Today's is just to the general listenership. Those of you who have listened to our show, we're here 5 months in on recording, much longer than that if you count our prep time and getting to know each other and learning and crafting what the show is going to be. We're now past the better part of a year sunk into this project, and that is wild. If you have listened even once, if you are hopping on at episode 1 and you've rode this vehicle with us this entire time, or if you just came online in episode 19 and you're trying to figure out what's going on, we appreciate you so much. It literally would not exist without comments and prompts and well wishes from those of you that are listening to the show. So thank you very, very much. We appreciate it to no end. And we hope to continue this for a long time.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Thank you all for being here.
This is one of the things that has gone unsaid, I think, for most of the time here. I appreciate your correspondence and your intellect and your willingness to take critique and change and edit. I feel like I have become better because of this project. So I appreciate you too.
I feel so much the same. You're going to make me cry, little buddy. So before that happens, we'll say goodbye. All of y'all, take care of yourselves, and we will talk to you next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.